All right, we're going to try this again. Let's hope it works this time. All right, so you have a checklist of different things to experiment with when it comes to painting in watercolor. I just recorded this and the audio didn't work. Hopefully it works this time. All right, number 1 on the checklist is a wet on dry wash. What that means is your paint is wet, obviously, but your paper is dry. You're going to tilt your drawing board towards you. And you do this for a couple different reasons. You should have a wash already mixed up here. I'll use this ugly red color. What you want to do is, starting in the top left, you go across your paper, back into your wash. You overlap that line you just made back into your wash. You want to make sure you're going into your wash every single time and getting the same amount of paint on your brush. You might think that it looks bad to have this extra bit of watercolor there, but that is in fact how this is supposed to go. That bead helps you have the right amount of your wash in each line across and get a nice smooth coverage. So rookie mistake here in 101, I am now running out of wash. You'll see me, I'll switch to a different color, I guess. We'll see how this goes. Ooh. All right, so don't make the mistake I did and run out of wash before you get to the bottom. Your goal is to have a nice smooth coverage of one color from top to bottom. When you get to the bottom and you have a little extra, you can dry your brush off on your paper towel and then soak up some of that extra. All right, you can see my nice washes in other ones. Sorry. Okay, a wet on wet wash just means your paper is wet. So what I'm going to do is the exact same thing I just did before here, but just with water. My water is a little dirty, so we'll see how that goes. But with just water, I'm going to go across my paper. Same technique. And then lay a wash on top of that. Now you'll see all of my rectangles of paper have a label in the top left. It is the paper's brand. I'm having you do that because there are 4 different papers to choose from, and I'd like you to decide which paper you want to paint your final on. This Halifax paper is junk. But watercolor paper is expensive. We're just experimenting on it. So it's okay for experimenting, but you won't want to do this for your washes. Do this for some of the other experiments that are easier. All right, so now that my paper is wet, then I go back and I do my wash on top. Same thing, I overlap the line. And again, this Halifax paper is horrible, so it's not going to work well. But if you do this on a different paper, it will work just fine. I just switched to water because I ran out of my wash again. Right, this is the 4th time I'm doing this today. Okay. Next thing on your list is wet on wet paint. So what that means is if you make a mark, I'm going to get a more saturated color here, nice and dark. If you make a mark on wet paper, it's going to bleed and blur. It's only really wet down here. Here's a nice example right here. Whereas I make that same mark over here on dry paper and it's nice and crisp and clean. Nice and crisp and clean. Versus over here where it bled out. So that's wet on wet versus wet on dry paint. These next 5 I'm going to do working on a piece of fruit or veggie or whatever it is you plan to paint for your final. This is a nice quick little practice. I have 2 of them going at the same time because I want them to dry in between. So shadows and highlights. The best thing you want to be able to practice and do is to create a change in value from dark to light. So my pear is darker on the left side, lighter on the right side. And I'm just going to check that this is still working. It is not. Or is it? All right, so I'm going to start with this darker green, and I am going to start on the bottom left of my pear. The left side is in shadow, the right is a highlight. So when I get over here, what I'm going to do is wipe a little bit of that paint off, and I'm going to very slowly and carefully pull what little bit of paint there is left over to the right. I cleaned my brush off and dried it off, so there's just a little bit of water on there. So I should have a nice solid wash that goes from dark to light. Here it's a little striped, but I'll do another one on top. I'll make the bottom of this pear dark. When I start running out of paint, or I want to start getting lighter, I wipe some of that off so there's less of it here. Wipe some more off and spread what I have left up to the top. So this one now goes dark to light, and this one is left to right, dark to light. There's almost a little too much here. I can wipe that off. I still have my board at a tilted angle, and I don't need to anymore. All right, your best way for making one of your easiest ways for making shadows and highlights is that technique I just showed you. Another one is masking fluid. So masking fluid either comes in a jar like this or a squeeze bottle like this. This has a sharp needle-like piece in here that goes inside of here as to keep this from drying out and getting clogged. So masking fluid you can drip out of this bottle or draw lines with this bottle. Or for the other one, sorry, I gotta make sure to get that back in the right spot before I close this. The other one, after you shake this, what you would do is pour just a teeny tiny bit into your palette. And you can use this right here. You could use a yucky toothbrush, a paintbrush out of the Studio Art bin. Do not use a good, expensive paintbrush. It will ruin them. So what this dries like is if you've ever gotten a credit card in the mail and it's stuck to a paper, it's kind of got like a rubbery consistency there. Once this dries, that's what that turns into. Do not use a good, expensive watercolor paintbrush, please. This is what dried, almost dried, masking fluid looks like. I have some right here, here, and here. When this dries, I will peel this off and you can see what it looks like. This is another technique for highlights. So my watercolor does not stick where I've put my masking fluid. So I might do a couple washes on my fruit first. After it's dry, put my masking fluid on. After that's dry, I can put a few more washes and keep deepening and darkening those colors. This will create some more highlights for me. All right, going down my checklist here. Wiping out of wet. This is a good technique to use for clouds. If I'm painting a sky, a nice dark area here, I can use a little section of my paper towel and wipe out of there to create some texture or highlights. Layering similar colors. That's what I've been doing here and here. Different kinds of greens. Layering complementary colors is a nice way to correct something. So in this painting here, I've been doing this as an example and photographing it as I go right here for this assignment. You can see what I did here a few days ago. Oh, it's so hard to see in this video. Is I painted this leaf almost kind of like a neon green by accident, and I needed to dull it down. So what I did is I made a red wash and painted red on top of this because it is green's complement to naturally dull that. That is what you would use a complementary wash for. One of the cases. It also could just make your piece look a bit more rich and dynamic. Okay, we're going to keep moving. Try to keep this short. Dry brush. Again, you're not going to use a nice expensive watercolor brush for this. You're going to use a studio art brush. And with a brush that is dried, I'm going to get just a little bit of highly pigmented watercolor on there. And I can use this to create grass or hair or fur. That is the dry brush technique. Splatter. Again, I'm going to use this cheap brush. Splatter. Splatter with a tracing paper mask. Please excuse my notes. I thought I was done with this demonstration. I put a piece of tracing paper on top of my pear and I cut it out. What this does is it protects the background so I can splatter on my pear without splattering anywhere else. And pears sometimes have those kind of spots to them. So I can splatter on my pear while protecting the background. Okay, salt. I'm not even going to do that one. I'll just show you what it looks like. Put a dark area of color down and sprinkle a salt shaker on top of it. The salt will take up that water, that moisture, and after it's dried, you rub it up and it creates a nice textured kind of look. Wax resist is in parentheses because you are not required to do it, but I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so here is an example of a yellow crayon here. This is a wax resist. It's kind of like decorating an Easter egg. You're probably not going to use it in your final piece, but it's kind of a fun thing to do. Here's a better example. You can maybe see better the salt. Combining with pen and ink here, it's just kind of a style choice. You could outline some of your stuff in pen and ink. This is a really nice example of a little bit of everything. So this is wet on wet in the background to make kind of little blobs of colors. It almost looks like out of focus flowers in the background, whereas the ones up front are more crisp and clean. There's splatter and there's dry brush grass. All right, the last two on our checklist here, value scale and color transition. So I kind of did a value transition here, a dark to light in these. Now I'm going to do a color transition. Very similar. I'm going to use this deep dark red, mixing up a wash. Go to my lighter red. Clean my brush. I go into my next color, blend them together. Oh, they look too similar. Only other colors I have over here are green. They will not blend pretty. But I will do it anyway. You'll sometimes see me go back and forth here if I'm trying to blend two colors. Got some more red back in here to mix with the wet green. Oh, you can't even see it on the video. Oh, goodness gracious. Sorry, this is horrible. You guys will just have to do the best you can, and I'll be back to help you. Value scale is the last one. Here you see the last two value scales I did, darker to lighter, more highly pigmented to more watery. So I'll just use this dark green that I have right here. Then I'm just going to add some water. Too much water. Add some more water, etc. I want to go down the line. So they're small, even steps. Think back to the value scales we did in studio art with our pencils. Same thing. This one's much better than the others. All right, so that was 2 full days of lessons combined really quickly. So I apologize, that was done super quickly, but I think you've got the gist. Do the best you can. These are not really pretty. They do not have to be. They're experiments. So you're trying a little bit of everything everywhere. Just make sure that you try all 15 of the things on your checklist. All right, happy painting, guys.